The courtroom was packed. The air inside was thick with tension as Judge Eleanor Carter took her seat at the bench, her usual composed expression giving away no sign of the storm raging within her. She had spent years presiding over cases, delivering justice with an iron will, yet nothing in her career had prepared her for what was about to unfold. Today was just another trial, or so she thought. Little did she know, this case would unravel a truth so shocking that it would bring her to her knees. The moment she laid eyes on the prisoner standing before her, everything in her world shifted. The defendant was a young woman named Ava Monroe, accused of theft. She stood in handcuffs, her face hardened by years of struggle. There was something strangely familiar about her, something that made Eleanor's heart pound in her chest. It wasn't just her eyes, though they held an eerie resemblance to someone Eleanor had lost long ago. It wasn't just the way she stood, defiant yet vulnerable. It was something far more subtle, far more haunting. But Eleanor brushed off the unsettling feeling. It wasn't possible. She had long stopped believing in miracles. The trial commenced, proceeding in its usual manner. The prosecution presented its case, and Eleanor listened intently, her mind sharp as always. She focused on every detail, as she had done for years, ensuring fairness and justice. But then, just as Ava raised her hands to adjust her tattered sweater, Eleanor's gaze landed on something, a small silver necklace resting against the prisoner's collarbone. Her breath caught, her vision blurred. Time seemed to stop. She knew that necklace. It was impossible. Yet there it was, an antique locket with the initials SC delicately engraved on its surface. A wave of nausea rolled over her. Memories came rushing back like a flood. That necklace wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was Sophia's, her daughter's, the daughter who had vanished without a trace 10 years ago, the daughter Eleanor had spent years searching for, only to be met with dead ends and heartbreak. How was this woman wearing it? 1,000 thoughts stormed through her mind, each more terrifying than the last. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs, her body frozen as the courtroom around her continued its proceedings, oblivious to the silent war within her. And then, as if the weight of realization was too much to bear, Eleanor's world went dark. The last thing she heard before collapsing was the distant echo of gasps rippling through the courtroom. She had spent a lifetime delivering verdicts, but today fate had delivered hers. The case was no longer just about justice. It was about uncovering the truth, a truth that had been buried for a decade, a truth that was now staring her in the face. Would this trial finally give Eleanor the answers she had spent 10 years searching for, or would it lead to more heartbreak? The past was no longer behind her. It was right in front of her, wearing her daughter's necklace. Judge Eleanor Carter had always believed in justice. It was the one constant in her life, the one thing she could control. From the moment she stepped into law school, she had sworn to uphold the truth, to ensure fairness in a world often filled with cruelty. She had worked tirelessly to become one of the most respected judges in the state, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering principles. But beneath the cold, professional exterior, Eleanor carried a pain that never faded, a wound that refused to heal, a wound that had been left open for 10 years. Before tragedy struck, Eleanor had been more than a judge. She had been a mother. Her daughter, Sophia Carter, was the light of her life, her heart walking outside her body. Eleanor had raised her alone, balancing her demanding career with motherhood. It wasn't easy, but Sophia had been the kind of child who made it all worthwhile. She was bright, kind, and full of life, with dreams of becoming an artist. At 15, she had already displayed remarkable talent, filling their home with sketches and paintings that told stories only she could imagine. Eleanor had always encouraged her, promising to support whatever path she chose, but all of that had been stolen from her on a cold autumn evening. It had started as an ordinary day. Sophia had left for school in the morning, flashing her mother a quick smile before heading out the door. Eleanor remembered it vividly, the way her daughter had turned at the last moment and called, "Love, you Mom." It was such a small moment, so routine, yet it was the last time she ever saw her. When the school called that afternoon, asking why Sophia hadn't attended class, Eleanor's world shattered. The next few hours were a blur of panic and desperation. Eleanor had driven to every place Sophia could have gone. She called her daughter's friends, knocked on neighbors' doors, pleaded with the police to start looking immediately. But as the hours turned into days, then weeks, then months, all they found were empty roads and dead ends. It was as if Sophia had vanished into thin air. The police investigation ran cold, and eventually the world moved on. But Eleanor didn't. She couldn't. For years, she had searched. She hired private investigators, combed through old case. Files followed every whisper of a lead. She had gone through hell hoping for a miracle, but the only thing she ever found was Sophia's silver necklace, abandoned in an alleyway miles away from home. It was the necklace Eleanor had given her on her 15th birthday, a delicate silver locket with her initials, SC. It had been meant as a symbol of protection, a token of love. Instead, it became the only clue to a nightmare that never ended. Eleanor had held onto that necklace for years, gripping it in moments of grief, whispering silent prayers to the daughter who never returned. The police told her to move on. Friends and colleagues told her to accept reality. But how could she? How could a mother accept not knowing whether her child was alive or dead? With no answers, she did the only thing she knew how. She buried herself in work. She climbed the ranks in the legal system, using the weight of justice to keep her own demons at bay. If she couldn't save her daughter, she would save others. But no amount of verdicts could silence the aching emptiness inside her. The guilt ate away at her. What if Sophia had called out for her that night? What if she had been scared, crying, waiting for her mother to find her? Eleanor's heart broke over and over again, every single day, for 10 long years. She imagined 1,000 scenarios. Was she taken? Was she hurt? Was she still alive? The not knowing was worse than anything else. As time passed, her pain turned into something sharper, something she could wield. Determination. She built walls around her emotions, turning herself into a fortress. In the courtroom, she was strong, unshaken, always in control. People saw her as powerful, composed, almost untouchable. They never saw the woman who went home to an empty house, who sat in Sophia's untouched bedroom and traced the fading outlines of old photographs. But the years of strength came crashing down in an instant, the moment she saw the necklace on Ava Monroe's neck. It wasn't just a similar design. It was Sophia's necklace, her daughter's initials, a piece of the past that should have been lost forever. A piece of her daughter, now worn by a prisoner standing before her in court. As Eleanor lay unconscious in the hospital bed after collapsing, her mind drifted through old memories. Sophia's laughter, her gentle voice, the way she used to hug Eleanor so tightly as if she never wanted to let go. Then she saw the cold courtroom again, the prisoner's face, and that necklace. The realization clawed at her like a living thing. Could it be? Could Ava Monroe somehow be connected to Sophia? The doctors said exhaustion and stress had caused her collapse, but Eleanor knew better. It wasn't exhaustion. It was a decade of grief and loss slamming into her all at once. It was the weight of a truth she wasn't ready to face. If Ava Monroe had Sophia's necklace, then she had answers, and Eleanor would stop at nothing to get them. The dim, fluorescent lights of the holding cell flickered as Ava Monroe sat with her back against the cold wall, her wrists still red from the tight metal cuffs. She had been through this routine before. Arrest, interrogation, and now waiting for a judge to decide her fate. But this time felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, an eerie stillness that sent a chill down her spine. She had been accused of theft, but Ava knew the world had labeled her something much worse long before this moment. a street criminal, a runaway, a lost cause. She had never cared much for the law, and the law had never cared much for her. The streets had taught her that the world was cruel, that no one came to save you. You had to fight to survive, and Ava had done exactly that. Survival was her only crime. She had learned early on that trust was a weakness. She had no family, no history worth remembering, at least none that she could recall. Her earliest memories were fragmented, pieces of a life that never quite fit together. There were moments, flashes of a different existence, a different name whispered in dreams. But they meant nothing. She was Ava Monroe now, and she was alone. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor, pulling her from her thoughts. A guard unlocked the cell, motioning for her to stand. "Time to face the judge," he muttered. Ava let out a small, humorless laugh. Another judge, another sentence, another day wasted. She walked into the courtroom with the same indifferent mask she always wore, refusing to let fear show. If there was one thing she had learned on the streets, it was that fear made you a target. She would never be a target. Again, as she stepped forward, Ava's eyes flickered to the judge's bench. That's when she saw her, Judge Eleanor Carter. Something about her sent an unsettling feeling crawling up Ava's spine. The woman's gaze was sharp, heavy, as if she was seeing right through her. Ava had stood before plenty of judges before, but none had looked at her like this, not with anger, not with judgment, but with something else entirely. A strange, unexplainable recognition. Ava wasn't sure why, but for the first time in a long time, she felt exposed. She instinctively reached up, gripping the small silver locket around her neck, as she always did when she felt uneasy. It was the only possession she had ever truly cared about, the only thing that had stayed with her through every struggle. She had no memory of where she had gotten it, only that she had always had it. The initials SC were engraved on its surface, a mystery she had long stopped trying to solve. It didn't matter who had given it to her. All that mattered was that it was hers. Ava felt Judge Carter's eyes widen, her face draining of color. Then, before Ava could react, she watched the judge collapse right there in the courtroom. Gasps filled the room as the gavel clattered to the floor. Ava had seen many things in her life, but she had never seen a judge faint, and she had no idea why her presence had caused it. Something was wrong, very wrong. The courtroom fell into chaos. Gasps echoed off the wooden walls as Judge Eleanor Carter collapsed onto the floor, her robes pooling around her like fallen shadows. The gavel, which had once symbolized control, now lay abandoned, rolling slowly until it hit the base of the judge's bench. Lawyers, clerks, and security officers rushed forward, their voices blending into a frantic hum. From where she stood, Ava Monroe froze. She had spent her life fighting to survive, her instincts sharp, her mind always ready for the next move. But this was different. She had seen people pass out before, seen far worse things on the streets. Yet the look in the judge's eyes before she collapsed, that was what sent an unshakable feeling crawling up Ava's spine. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else, something terrifyingly familiar. Two guards rushed to help the judge, one of them calling for a medic. Ava watched, still gripping the silver locket around her neck, her fingers pressing against the worn metal. Her pulse quickened. Had she done something? No, that didn't make sense. This was just another trial, another courtroom. Yet the way Judge Carter had looked at her, it was as if she had seen a ghost. Minutes passed before Eleanor finally stirred. Her breathing was uneven, her vision blurred as she tried to piece together what had just happened. The world around her felt distant, voices muffled like they were coming through water. Then, like a jolt of electricity, the memory of what she had seen slammed into her chest. The necklace, Sophia's necklace, the same locket Eleanor had given her daughter on her 15th birthday, the last birthday before she disappeared. As the realization took hold, Eleanor sat up, her hands trembling. The paramedics asked if she needed to be taken to the hospital, but she shook her head. She needed answers, right now. Ignoring the whispers in the courtroom, Eleanor turned her gaze toward the defendant, toward Ava. The girl stood stiffly, suspicion and confusion flickering in her sharp eyes. Sophia had those same eyes. But no, it couldn't be. It was impossible. Sophia was gone, wasn't she? Eleanor's voice, though hoarse, cut through the heavy silence. "Where did you get that necklace?" Ava frowned. She hadn't expected a personal question from the judge. That was new. Her first instinct was to lie, to brush it off, to avoid trouble. But something about the intensity in Eleanor's eyes made her hesitate. "It's mine," Ava finally said, her voice guarded. "Where did you get it?" Eleanor repeated, her heartbeat slamming against her ribs. Ava exhaled, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of Eleanor's stare. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've had it for as long as I can remember." The answer made Eleanor's blood run cold. As long as she could remember. That didn't make sense. That necklace, Sophia's necklace, had been lost along with her daughter. Ava Monroe. Eleanor whispered the name, as if testing it against the truth forming in her mind. It didn't fit. Not with the pieces of the puzzle now shifting into place. The murmurs in the courtroom continued, but Eleanor barely heard them. She looked at the court bailiff standing nearby. "Adjourn the case," she ordered abruptly. The bailiff hesitated. This wasn't protocol, but a single glance at Eleanor's face made him nod. Ava's stomach clenched. What was happening? She had been in court before, but this was different. The judge had collapsed at the sight of her. Now, she was ending the hearing without a ruling. None of it made sense. Why was this woman looking at her like she knew her? As the guards moved to escort Ava back to holding, Eleanor stood, gripping the edge of the bench as if to steady herself. She had spent 10 years searching for Sophia. Now, in the most unexpected way, she might have found her. But if Ava Monroe really was Sophia Carter, then one terrifying question remained unanswered. Where had she been all these years? The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air as judge. Eleanor Carter slowly opened her eyes. The bright overhead light stung, and for a moment she was disoriented, her mind foggy from the events that had led her here. The steady beep of a heart monitor echoed in the quiet hospital room, a stark reminder that her body had betrayed her in the courtroom. But as the fog lifted, reality slammed into her like a tidal wave. The necklace, the prisoner, the way her. A world had come undone in an instant. She sat up quickly, her breath shallow. The dizziness hit her immediately, but she ignored it. Ava Monroe. That name meant nothing to her, and yet the moment she had looked at that young woman, at her necklace, something deep inside her had cracked wide open. She reached for her chest, where a familiar weight should have been. The matching necklace she had kept all these years, the one she had once given her daughter, Sophia. But instead of comfort, she felt only the fabric of her hospital gown. It wasn't there. Her head turned sharply to the small bedside table where a nurse had placed her belongings. She fumbled for her purse, hands shaking as she pulled out the locket she had carried for a decade. Sophia's locket, the exact twin of the one Ava had been wearing. There was no doubt now. A knock on the door made her flinch. The nurse entered, offering a polite but worried smile. "Judge Carter, you gave us quite a scare." Eleanor barely nodded, her mind elsewhere. She needed to leave. She needed to see Ava. The nurse adjusted the IV drip before speaking again. "Your collapse was due to stress and exhaustion. The doctors recommend rest, but—" She hesitated. "There's a detective outside who'd like to speak with you. He said it was urgent." Eleanor's breath caught. Detective Ryan Mitchell. He had worked Sophia's missing persons case 10 years ago. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but now of all times he was here. "Send him in," Eleanor said, her voice stronger than she felt. The door opened and Detective Mitchell stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He hadn't aged much, but there was something different about his stance, a knowing look in his eyes. He sat in the chair beside her bed, exhaling slowly. "I heard what happened in court," he said carefully. "And I heard about the necklace." Eleanor gripped the locket tighter. "It's hers, Ryan," she whispered. "It's Sophia's." Mitchell hesitated. "I don't know what to say, Eleanor. But if there's even a chance—" His voice trailed off. He didn't have to finish. If Ava Monroe was Sophia Carter, then that meant only one thing. Someone had stolen Eleanor's daughter from her. And for 10 years, they had hidden the truth. The hospital walls felt suffocating. Judge Eleanor Carter had spent years listening to the truth unfold in her courtroom, but now the truth was slipping through her fingers, just out of reach. She couldn't sit here waiting. She needed answers. Ignoring the nurse's protests, Eleanor threw off the blanket and stood, steadying herself against the bed. Detective Ryan Mitchell sighed, but didn't try to stop her. He knew her well enough to understand that once Eleanor Carter had made up her mind, nothing could keep her from seeing it through. "We need to talk to her," Eleanor said, slipping. "On her coat." "You just collapsed in a courtroom, Eleanor," Mitchell reminded her. "Maybe take a second before you go charging into this." But there was no time, not after what she had seen, not after 10 agonizing years of searching for. "Sophia, I need to look her in the eyes," she said firmly. "And I need to ask her what happened." Mitchell didn't argue. Instead, he led the way, escorting her out of the hospital and toward his car. The ride to the detention center was silent, except for the occasional glance Mitchell gave Eleanor, as if trying to gauge whether she was ready for what she was about to face. Eleanor didn't care. Ready or not, she had to know. When they arrived, the guards escorted them through a series of locked doors before stopping at a small interrogation room. Through the one-way mirror, Eleanor saw Ava Monroe sitting inside. The young woman was pacing, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her movements restless. Eleanor's heart pounded in her ears. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The shape of her face, the curve of her nose, her eyes. Mitchell glanced at Eleanor. "Are you sure you want to do this yourself?" "Yes." Her voice was steel. She took a deep breath, then pushed open the door and stepped inside. Ava froze the moment she saw her. For a second, something flickered across her face, something uncertain, something almost vulnerable. But it was gone just as fast, replaced by her usual guarded expression. Eleanor sat down across from her. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward, folding her hands together on the table. "I need you to tell me where you got that necklace." Ava exhaled sharply, rolling her eyes. "We've been over this." "No, we haven't." Eleanor's voice was calm but firm. "I know that necklace. I gave it to my daughter, Sophia Carter, when she turned 15, and you're wearing it. So I'll ask again, where did you get it?" Ava's jaw tightened. "I don't remember," she muttered. "You don't remember?" Eleanor repeated. Ava hesitated, then shook her head. "I've had it for as long as I can remember. I don't know where it came from." Eleanor's fingers clenched. She's lying, or she truly doesn't remember. Either way, the missing pieces were starting to come together. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out her own locket, placing it gently on the table between them. "This is the other half," she said. "It was part of a matching set, Sophia's necklace and mine." Ava's eyes flickered down to the locket, her breath catching for the briefest moment. Her fingers twitched, as if she wanted to reach for it, but she stopped herself. Instead, she clenched her fists and looked away. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice low. Eleanor took a steadying breath. "I want to know the truth. I want to know who you are, and I want to know if you are Sophia." Ava's entire body tensed. She let out a strained laugh, shaking her head. "That's crazy!" "Is it?" Eleanor pressed. "You don't remember where you got the necklace. You don't remember your childhood. You don't have any records of your past. What if there's a reason for that?" Ava's breath hitched, and for the first time, Eleanor saw fear in her eyes, a fear she recognized all too well. "I don't know who I was before." Ava admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't remember anything before I was 15. Eleanor's pulse stopped. 15. That was the same age Sophia had gone missing. Mitchell stepped forward, placing a DNA test kit on the table. There's one way to find out for sure, he said. All we need is a sample. Ava looked at the kit, then back at Eleanor. Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly curled them into fists. For someone who acted so tough, there was something undeniably fragile about her in this moment. You really think I could be your daughter? Ava asked, her voice unsteady. Eleanor's throat tightened. I think there's a chance, she admitted. And if there is, I'm not going to lose you again. Ava stared at her, as if trying to decide whether to run or stay. Then slowly, she reached for the DNA test kit. The room felt colder than before. Ava Monroe sat frozen, staring at the DNA test kit on the table. Her fingers hovered over it, her breath shallow. Could it really be happening? Could the woman sitting across from her, the woman who had collapsed at the sight of her, be telling the truth? Could she really be someone else? Someone she had forgotten? Eleanor Carter's gaze never wavered. She was waiting, hoping. Ava could see it in her eyes, the desperate longing of a mother searching for a lost child. It made Ava's stomach twist in a way she didn't understand. Her past had always been a mystery. She had never questioned it, because there had never been any answers. Her first memories were of waking up in a dimly lit room, surrounded by strangers, all children like her. No names, no families, just a voice telling her to forget the past because it didn't matter anymore. Survival was all that mattered. Her hands clenched into fists. I don't know who I was before, she muttered. I don't remember anything before I was 15. Eleanor inhaled sharply. You disappeared when you were 15. Ava shook her head, as if trying to shake off a memory that refused to come. I don't remember disappearing. I just remember being somewhere else, a place that didn't feel real, a place where no one cared who you were before. They just took you in and told you that you belonged to them now. Mitchell leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. Who took you? Ava hesitated. She had never spoken about it before. She had buried it deep inside, convinced herself it didn't matter. But now, with the necklace, the judge, and this DNA test sitting between them, the past refused to stay hidden. I don't know who they were, she admitted, but I remember the rules. You didn't ask questions. You didn't speak unless spoken to. And if you tried to run... Her voice caught and she swallowed hard. You learned the hard way that you didn't run. Eleanor's face paled. You were taken. Ava let out a bitter laugh. Maybe. Or maybe I was just abandoned. Maybe I was never Sophia Carter. Maybe I was just another kid nobody wanted. No. Eleanor's voice was strong, unwavering. You were never unwanted. Ava clenched her jaw. I don't remember being wanted either. Silence stretched between them. The weight of what had been lost, what had been stolen, hung heavy in the air. Eleanor reached out, hesitating before resting her hand lightly on Ava's. I spent 10 years searching for my daughter, Eleanor whispered. And if there's even the smallest chance that you are her, I will do everything in my power to bring you home. Ava looked at the DNA test. Her heart thundered against her ribs. If she took this test, there would be no going back. No more pretending her past didn't matter. No more running from the ghosts that haunted her. After a long pause, she picked up the test, and for the first time in years, she let herself hope. The waiting was unbearable. Judge Eleanor Carter sat in her office, fingers clenched around the arms of her chair, staring at the clock on the wall. Every second felt like a lifetime. The DNA test had been sent to the lab, and now all she could do was wait. She had spent 10 years searching for Sophia, but somehow these last few hours felt like the longest of her life. Across the room, Detective Ryan Mitchell leaned against the desk, watching her with quiet concern. "You should get some rest," he said. "This isn't going to change overnight." Eleanor exhaled sharply. "If I close my eyes, I'll just see her face. Ava, Sophia, whoever she is. I see her, and I just know, it's her." Mitchell nodded, but said nothing. He had been a cop long enough to recognize the weight of a mother's instinct. He wasn't going to argue with it. A sharp buzz from Eleanor's phone shattered the silence. Her heart stopped. She reached for the device with shaking hands, her breath catching as she read the message from the lab. DNA match confirmed. The world blurred. Eleanor had imagined this moment for so long, prayed for it, begged for it, and now it was real. Her daughter, Sophia, was alive. She shot up from her chair. "Where is she?" Mitchell had already grabbed his coat. "They're bringing her in." Minutes later, Eleanor stood in the same interrogation room where she had first questioned Ava Monroe. Only now, everything was different. The guards led Ava inside, but they didn't treat her like a prisoner anymore. They knew what she was now, a missing girl found. Ava walked in cautiously, her usual tough exterior cracked at the edges. She glanced at Eleanor, then at the folder on the table. She knew. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor took a deep breath and said, "It's you." Ava's lips parted slightly, but she didn't respond. Eleanor stepped forward, her hands trembling. "You are Sophia Carter. You are my daughter." Ava swallowed hard. "I don't remember," she whispered. Tears burned in Eleanor's eyes. "It doesn't matter. I remember you." Ava let out a shaky breath, her walls crumbling. "I don't know how to be Sophia," she admitted. "I've been Ava for so long." Eleanor reached out, gently taking Ava's hands in hers. "Then we'll figure it out together." Ava's breath hitched, and for the first time in 10 years, she let herself be held, let herself believe. Eleanor Carter had lost her daughter once. She wasn't going to lose her again. The truth had been found, but justice was still waiting. Judge Eleanor Carter sat in her office, staring at the case files scattered across her desk. The DNA results had confirmed that Ava Monroe was Sophia Carter, her daughter who had disappeared 10 years ago. But that answer only raised a far more disturbing question. Who had taken her? Sophia had no memory of her past before waking up in captivity. Someone had erased her life, stolen her identity, and left her in the shadows. Eleanor needed to know who. She needed to find the person responsible. Across from her, Detective Ryan. Mitchell tapped his fingers against the file in front of him. "I ran a check on the name Ava Monroe," he said. "It's a fake. No birth certificate, no records. It was created about 9 years ago, which means someone gave her that name. After she was taken..." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Who?" Mitchell exhaled and pushed a photo across the desk. "We found a connection." Eleanor's eyes widened in horror. It couldn't be. The man in the photo was James Calloway, her late husband's former business partner. He had been close to her family once, a friend, someone she had trusted. But after her husband's death, he had vanished. Mitchell continued, "Calloway ran a private group home for troubled youth. On the surface, it looked legitimate, but behind the scenes he was trafficking kids, erasing their pasts, forcing them into new identities. We think Sophia was one of them." Eleanor's stomach churned. All these years, had Sophia been right under their noses? Mitchell leaned forward. "We have evidence." A former associate flipped on him. "He's been hiding in another state, but now that we've made the connection, we can bring him in." Eleanor's heart pounded. "I want to be there when you do." Hours later, the sting operation was set. Officers surrounded a run-down motel on the outskirts of town where Calloway was hiding. When the police stormed in, the man barely resisted. He smirked as if he thought he was untouchable. But as soon as Eleanor stepped forward, his smirk vanished. "You," he muttered, eyes narrowing. Eleanor's voice was cold as steel. "You stole my daughter." Calloway's expression flickered just for a second, before he sneered. "She forgot you, you know. We made sure of it." Eleanor clenched her fists. "Not anymore." As Calloway was dragged away in cuffs, the weight of 10 years of grief and unanswered questions finally began to lift. Sophia had been found. The man who took her would pay. Justice had been served. But the real healing was just beginning. The sun cast a golden glow through the window of Judge Eleanor Carter's home, a place that had felt empty for so many years. But today it was different. The house, once silent, now carried the faint sound of footsteps, Sophia's footsteps. It had been weeks since the truth had come out, since James Calloway was arrested and the past was no longer a mystery. Sophia Carter had been found. But finding her was only the beginning. Eleanor stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, watching as Sophia slowly moved through the space. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, a blank slate, much like the life she was now trying to piece. Together, Sophia ran her fingers over the edge of the desk, her face unreadable. "It's strange," she murmured, "being here, knowing this is supposed to feel like home." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat. "It will," she said, softly, "with time." Sophia turned, meeting her mother's gaze. Her mother. The word still felt foreign, like a dream she had barely woken up from. "What if I never remember?" she asked. "What if I can't be who I was?" Eleanor stepped forward, placing a gentle hand over Sophia's. "You don't have to be who you were," she whispered. "You just have to be you. And I will love you no matter who that is." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. For years she had convinced herself that she didn't need anyone, that she was alone in the world. But she wasn't, not anymore. She hesitated for a moment before stepping closer and wrapping her arms around Eleanor. It was awkward at first. 10 years of distance couldn't disappear overnight. But as Eleanor held her daughter close, Sophia allowed herself to be held. For the first time in a decade, she was home, and this time she wasn't going anywhere. Thanks for listening to the story. If you've been through something similar, share your experience in the comments. Let's support each other. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to watch the story, She Was a Waitress at a Wedding, then stopped cold when she saw her husband as the groom. If you want to watch the story how both pilots fainted mid-flight, then a 13-year-old grabbed the controls.